The Big Light presents.
I'd really lost myself because losing myself was easier than facing like what I knew was the case, which was like Matt was someone that had lost a lot of people and didn't know how to cope with it, and had forgotten how to feel joy and how to feel value.
My name is Helena Rafai, and this is the A Sonic Hug podcast. Over the coming episodes, you're going to hear the voices of people from different walks of life who deal, experience and battle mental health issues. In this episode, I speak with Matt Hickman, a musician whose journey with mental health has been deeply intertwined with grief, identity and anxiety. Through our conversation, Matt reflects on his path to healing, including his decision to stop drinking at 21. It's a profound exploration of loss, self-discovery, and the ongoing journey of learning to value oneself. While ultimately hopeful, there are themes in this episode that listeners may find difficult to hear, including discussions around suicide. This is Matt's story.
I've had quite a long journey with mental health, ranging from anxiety to issues around eating and then depression. A lot of it has happened at different times in my life. I think for me, and I'm not sure how this plays out for other people, like I didn't really realise I had mental health issues until they became really significant in my life. So I think for my life, I probably have always been quite anxious. I thought when I was young, I was just really nervous, and I used to think to myself, like, I wish I didn't have the fear of doing things that everyone else seems not to have. And I just kind of thought, well, that is who I am, and I let it be a thing. And I didn't realise that actually I was just quite anxious, and I was unsure of surroundings, and I wasn't sure how to ask. And as I got older, I had some significant things happen in life, which led to like the first panic attack I had. And I didn't obviously know I was having a panic attack. I didn't know what they were. I thought I had a problem with my heart. And yeah, the anxiety got worse. And from that anxiety, I suppose I started to have some, I suppose, tics and issues around swallowing, which led to like issues with eating. And throughout this whole time, I actually had depression, and I didn't even know. And in the last few months, I'd been diagnosed as like a high functioning depressive, and that's been like something that I've obviously been for a long time in my life. I suppose I just didn't know, and I didn't know how to tell people, and I didn't know how to ask. Growing up, I grew up in Ayrshire, and I grew up in a town called Largs. You know, I had a really great family background. I was really fortunate with my mum and my dad. I have an older sister. One set of our grandparents lived nearby, so you know we were always surrounded and supported. I'm mixed race, so at some point in growing up that became a thing. But I was probably 8 the first time that even became a thing. I was always a kid that loved being outside, and I loved playing, and I just loved being people's company. I really didn't love being alone. But I suppose like the earliest things of like stuff happening around me was like my sister being quite unwell when she was young, so there was a lot of focus on her, and she had to go in and out of hospital. I kind of learned to just be in my own wee world sometimes, and then I loved being creative and playing. And I think for me, getting into school and meeting people became like quite difficult, because you start off in life and you have one group of friends, and then you go to like school, and then it changes. And I started to struggle a little bit with some teachers, and I wasn't like the thinnest kid, and I was called Matt, and then people used to call me Fat Matt, and I started to be chubbier, and I was just obviously growing, and I'm actually like ended up being quite tall and big built. But when you're young, that kind of looks different ways, and there's no scope for how that is. So like from quite early on, people were like really abrupt with me around my appearance, and then obviously race came into that, and being like for them, like it being like mixed or being black or brown, whatever it was, and having like curly hair. And like a few things I was thinking about lately were like two of the first things I can remember feeling just totally out of place were when they took you on school trips to like the swimming, and I just thought I don't want to go. I used to get so upset because I thought they call me fat, and if they see me with my t-shirt off, they're just gonna make fun of me, whatever. And then later in life, I didn't realise like how much of an issue I had with like my body image. And partially, again, growing up in the 90s, whenever we think about body image and the way people are described, or rightly or wrongly, like it was a lot of focus on women, because it was really horrific the way that they portrayed women on TV and magazines. And So it's kind of eradicated a conversation around like, but how do men view themselves and how have they been portrayed for themselves on TV? And men also get self-conscious, and there's this weird toxic masculinity and misogyny around like not discussing the fact that men also have like self-confidence issues. From that, the second thing was Halloween and realizing like everyone would be going as their favorite character ever, and because there wasn't that many black or mixed characters, I was like, well, who do I go as at Halloween? And just getting this really early, distinct realization that I was different, and then being so scared about what that would mean and not knowing how to embrace it or accept it. And it took a long time to adjust. And then at sometime around like 11 or 12, I found like a really great core group of friends that were just my people. And we were into the same things like music and games and wrestling, and music became the real common denominator, and that became my life obsession. I started to find people who looked like me, didn't look like me, sounded like me, sounded like the way I wanted it to sound. I got into guitar and rock and like all this music, like grunge, that was totally railing against the system, and it was all about angst, and it was all about like embracing the fact that you were different. And I think that really kind of saved me, and that's when I started to find the core people in terms of friends that were like, well, these people don't judge me, they just like me for who I am, and started the ability for me to gain my own personality and be proud of it. In my teenage years, I had this funny thing that like is the opposite of a lot of teenagers, where I just thought, I actually don't care what people think. Maybe it was the music I was listening to and the people I was with. And that was really great for the first few years of school, because I just thought I'm who I am, and I didn't struggle too much, and I started trying new things, and I got into like some sports, which gave me a lot of confidence, and drama particularly let me like express myself. And then I got to like that 15, 16, and it's around the time that like everyone starts getting girlfriends and all that, and they're saying to me, and I just wasn't really interested in having a girlfriend. And then I started to think again, that feeling came of like, am I normal? Like, because I just like what I like, and it's not that I don't want to have a girlfriend at some point in my life, whatever. I just am so into what I'm into, and I just had such a passion for like art and music, not art so much, but like music and things like that. And obviously, I grew up in like Ayrshire and the West Coast, and at this time, young teams and gangs were still a big thing, and there was a kind of almost resurgence of it around like football violence, probably partially because of like stupid films like Mean Streets and all that. Like, so then people started fighting again, and I was like bigger, so people used to try and like ask me to fight with them, or try and fight me, and I was really thinking, I'm not interested in any of that. And some of the boys who were like the tougher boys like found out I was doing things like drama, and really started to try and like berate me for it. And then once again, you start feeling this shame for like just being who you are. And I was like, oh God, not that feeling again. And I was really lucky, like at home, I just had parents that were like, you just are who you are and be who you be. But by this point, I obviously understood race, and I'd suffered racism, like both within school, outside of school. Like, because the thing about the time it first happened was like, I guess like it wasn't until retrospectively understood why it was bad. I was maybe like 8 to 10 the first time someone used the N word. And then again, I was like in high school, and someone was using the word and a kind of brandishing a knife. Yeah, then it became like within the curriculum, and even teachers sometimes saying things. And I just had this really lovely sweet spot of feeling like I just was who I was. And then as I got on, I started like making jokes to protect myself, and like being able to laugh about it and be funny about it. And it was all just to deflect from like hurting about it. Things were still all right at home. And then I guess when I was 16, like my dad passed away suddenly. He just dropped dead in the house during the summer, just before we were going back to school. And yeah, that just kind of changed everything, because for all of the things that were going on and the things that happened to people, and I had this real secure, safe structure at home with like such a supportive family, and then that was just absolutely decimated in one day. And to be honest, like I'm not sure I'd ever bounce back from it. I didn't really know how to cope. For obvious reasons, my mum wasn't coping, my sister wasn't coping, like my grandparents from my dad's side didn't know what to do, just kind of really panicked. His family didn't know how to be around us, his friends didn't know how to be around us. I just found that there was like this weird thing where everyone just looked at me like, oh gosh, I'm sorry, and I don't know how to be around you. And that was it. I just kind of felt like I was on my own with just no idea how to deal with grief. 16, 17, like, you know, really at that pivotal age where you're starting to figure out like what's next for me in terms of like, am I going to go to university? Like, is this me becoming a man? Like all of these things in my life. And I was just like, that happened, and it was like bang. And then to me, I was like, well, what do I do now? Like, do I go back to school? Like, school doesn't really feel like it matters because of everything that's happened. Like, life's short. And yeah, I really started to spiral then because, I actually remember the first time I went and did a sport thing. I think it might have been PE, I don't know. And my heart rate went up. And it was obviously because your heart rate goes up when you run. But as soon as I could feel it in my chest, I was like, oh. And then I realized that I was really panicked. And it's funny because the first week or so after I lost my dad, like for the first time in my life, I actually wasn't scared of anything. I had no fears in the world. And then one day it just became utter panic about everything. I was just couldn't stop thinking about death. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. It was quite a long process as well because it was a sudden death that has to be investigated and all that. So the grief was extended for weeks. And by the time things settled to like some sort of calm, it was absolutely not calm, but like the most calm they'd been. Everything after that spiraled, and then my coping became music and writing and being in the studio. One of my dad's friends had a home studio and used to just say, come over anytime, even if I was missing school. And when he was off, I would make tunes and make demos. And I was so lucky, I suppose, that I found these great people who were involved a little bit in music, who were like, oh, well, just if you love it, like come and do it if it's helping you. And yeah, that was it. That was the start of like severe anxiety and not really knowing how to handle it. And I guess like you're so sad and heartbroken as well. Like you don't know what to feel and then you don't know how to feel happy. And then the first time you laugh or you feel happy, you feel guilt, and all the emotions, I guess for me, just became overwhelming and confusing. And it became easier just to not deal with any of that. And just, I don't know, like I guess I probably started to make bad life choices and have people in my life I shouldn't have had in my life. And I really just didn't know who I was or what I was doing. And I became so obsessed with music that was it. That was my life now. And that kind of late teens to early 20s chapter.
As we've been listening to Matt's story about loss and personal struggles, let's take a moment to pause together. Stories of grief and anxiety can stir up deep emotions, and it's important we give ourselves space to acknowledge them. Find a comfortable position and let's take a deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale through your mouth. Notice how your body feels in this moment. Sometimes our bodies carry the weight of our experiences and the stories we hear. Take time to acknowledge any feelings that have surfaced, whether you're thinking about your own losses or simply feeling the impact of Matt's journey. Let's take 3 breaths together, allowing ourselves to be present with whatever emotions are here. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4. Remember that grief and healing aren't straightforward paths, and it's okay to take time to process difficult emotions. When you're ready, we'll continue with Matt's story.
I think losing my dad really challenged my identity because it came at a time where I really started to understand that I was mixed race and partly black and partly African. And then, like, so my dad's white and my mum's black. My dad's family knew who they were in their history, whereas my mum was adopted. So we had no link to what our heritage was. So suddenly I'm in this position where I have this secure identity, I suppose, through my dad, and I'm able to ask about all that. But I maybe didn't want to know. You only don't sometimes think about it until you're older. And through my mum's side, we didn't know him. There was possibly a chance we never would know because of the circumstances that led to my mum being in Scotland and being adopted, and how her family, like the whole lineage, is like a whole other story. So when my dad then went, I didn't have that security, and I think that's tough for my sister as well, because then it became like my sister's really white facing, and whereas I look very like my mum. And then suddenly she lost, like when we were all together, like the visual look of like, okay, that's how you're a mixed family. Whereas suddenly like she's got that anxiety about like, well, what do people look at me like because I'm with two people who look visibly black and I don't, and it just became really confusing and like we just were what we were, and like you talk about it a little bit, but it becomes so much more prominent right when you're getting older, and that made that really hard because he wasn't there, and then you feel this guilt of like I'm starting to associate as black and figure all that out, and like I just don't want it to diminish the fact like I know I have a white parent and it's not a thing, and but I know he wouldn't have cared. I know he was such a big advocate for like equality and anti-racism, and like people have stereotypes about music and all that. Like my mum listened to Johnny Mitchell, Johnny Mitchell and like white folk. My dad had like the biggest collection of blues and R&B and like African music, and he was just like so into other cultures, and he just wanted to know and learn, and he wanted people to be good, you know, and that's what's really hard with my dad, and a lot of people around him would say the same. Like sometimes when people pass, they get like glorified, but like really genuinely, like my dad was one of the good guys, and it really hit a lot of people hard because he was just that person that no matter what you could rely on, he was always there for everyone. He seemed to have time for anyone and everyone, no questions asked. And it didn't matter if he had no money to his name, which was often the case for us, and he would make sure that you had something. So all of that is really hard when you've got this person, and we'd actually got really close as well. Like I had started playing rugby, and neither of us knew anything about it, but it turned out I was good at it, and we both grew to love this sport. And we spent every week instead of like going to the games with the team, we used to think like, well, you work a lot, and I'm obviously at school, so we'd spend every Sunday together. We'd drive up, listen to tunes, talk about music, because that was his passion, and he loved guitars, and it was something that got me into music. And then yeah, we'd play the game and come back, and suddenly like I was really sad because I guess I'd reached that point where it wasn't just my dad who was starting to be my pal because I was old enough, and then it was gone, and then I remember the day as well he passed, like my gran saying to me like that's it, you know, like you're not a kid anymore. No one's got to look out for you. Not in a bad way, but you have to look out for yourself. Like the world's tough, and like you really have to get tough. And I'm glad she said it, but I took it on a bit too much. Like I get what she was saying, but I really became a thing for me where I was like, what's me against the world? And I struggled for a long time to genuinely let people be close to me and let them in because I thought, like, I don't need them. I need to just look out for myself. And also because I'd experienced such a horrific loss, it was like, oh man, I don't want to lose. Like, if you let someone in, you can lose them. And if you don't let people in, you can't lose them. But then you start to be on your own and like anxious. And one thing I've really realized this year is that like, I always minimized all the other griefs I felt because I had this thing of like, well, you've lived through one of the worst things that happened in front of you. Like, you were there when they were trying to revive him and they weren't successful. Like, you've seen it all happen. Like, nothing's worse than that. But all I actually did was like not let myself feel the normal amount of grief I should have felt for all the other situations. Which were a lot. Like, I had subsequently like 4 or 5 bereavements in a row over the space of like 4 years. And I remember every time it happened just thinking like, how have I not had a breakdown? Like, I can't really handle it. And it's really, really funny because we lost my grandpa after that, and I was actually in the middle of doing a theatre show, and I never went back to theatre after it. I just never acted again until like a couple of years ago. I was in a film, but I really loved theatre, and I just couldn't face it. Didn't go back to rugby, couldn't face it without my dad, and then lost my gran, who was like my best wee pal, and she'd like been through so much with me. And yeah, my aunt Rosalind was like such a great soul, and through that whole time, she kind of was always there to take me to things or pick me up or look after me. And one day we found out like she died in our house, and no one had known. And I thought, God, this can't get any worse. And I've jumped a bit in my life here, but then I was making a record, and I was making my first album, and I was finally like feeling a little bit more settled in life. I had a guitar teacher called Peter Driver when I was younger, and then we'd kept in touch. He was just an incredible human. I'd seen him 2 weeks before the record and said, I'm making a record and I can't wait to make the next one because I'd love to do a tune with you. You should be playing on it. I got into the pub the day after I finished the record, and the owner, who was his son-in-law, said, I need to chat to you. Like, Peter died last night. And I'd been like on tour and making the record and all that. And that was it for me. That was the next point of like, I just had a breakdown. I thought, I just can't handle it. And at this point, because what had happened after university, as I'd used touring as a way to run. I was always like, any gig I can do, any gig I can do, anything. I can't do gigs, okay, I'm working on tours. I ended up doing all these things just to anything to not be at home and have to deal with what I was going through. And then it just kind of hit me, and I thought, I can't actually run anymore because this is too much. And then, as hard as it was, became the time I thought, I have to actually deal with all this because I'm not coping, and there's only so far you can run. I think a lot of what I did to cope was probably unhealthy, from just constantly working and touring. At first, like I suppose I wasn't coping, but when I left university and I first started touring, I started to have real panic attacks. And then I started to have them on stage. And then I was drinking. I was like, oh, I'll just have a drink before I go and have a drink. And it didn't make it better. So actually by like 21, which is so young, but I'd already been touring, like with the band I was in before I was in Brown Bear. Like we'd already been touring loads and actually like missing a lot of university because of shows. And then I was like, I'll just drink a drink. And I was really good. Do you know what the thing about me and drinking was, like, I was really quiet about it. I wasn't like, I would be like, oh, in front of people, I'd be like, oh, I'll try that, I'll do this. But then privately would be drinking more than I let on. And then about 21, I just went, I'm never going to drink again because this is becoming something I'm going to rely on. And I haven't drank since then. It's been 12 years without drinking. But that didn't stop me just being self-destructive anyway. Like, it was like, you just fill it with other things. And I started to get this anxiety, as I say, in the panic attacks, which accumulated in like going to a flight home from Marseille, and I just had the worst panic. And when I got in, I was shaking. You know, I was like shaking from all the anxiety. I hadn't slept in days, and then I started choking on food. And then I got it in my head, I can't swallow. And then genuinely, like for about a year or so, I just couldn't eat properly, and I lost so much weight, and I was an anxious mess. Like I couldn't go out places. I had to have all these things in place. I only ate certain things. I had to eat by myself. Like it took years and years to be able to go into a restaurant and eat properly. Even on tours and shows, I used to take like a cup of soup with me and think I'll try and eat soup in private, and it was just became horrific. And I wasn't telling people, and I was really, really lucky that I told the manager, and he went, yeah, I know what anxiety is. I have anxiety as well. And he taught me through it. And honestly, even just knowing that someone else was going through it, like really increased like my well-being by so much, because I thought I was abnormal. I thought it probably had never happened to anyone else. And it was really hard having like such a physical reaction. But that was obviously because of years of ignoring all the kind of reactions that were happening like mentally for me. They started to have physical manifestations. Yeah. And then it became like, I'd been with a partner for a long time and we separated. Like it just became like I was constantly like dating people or like chatting to people, anyone, like hanging out with people, like any friend I could have, anyone that would want to hang out with me. Like I just couldn't be in my own company. It was just this constant need to be chatting to people, whether they were good in my life, bad in my life. Like I wouldn't sleep for days. I would turn up for shows. I would not do shows. I would have panic attacks on stage and then repeat, and couldn't travel properly. Yeah, everything was just a mess, and it became really unhealthy because my coping mechanism was like not coping, and it was doing anything to feel even rubbish because it was better than feeling what I had. And I think I probably became quite cold and distant from people. And as well, at this time, obviously, like we'd started to do things with the band and be in the press, and then that became this other thing of like, oh no, and like I don't want to be here, and I'm letting people down because I can't fly and all that. And it was a really horrible, horrible time in my life. And I actually ended up working on a tour, and I think it was one of the best things that happened, like having it be removed from being a performance thing to being like there was no pressure on me, and I had to learn to travel, but like there was no real responsibility. And then I was around people on tour who had like really big issues, and I learned to look after people and like look after myself and look after structure. And I realized I could travel, and like having other work and other things to do gave me this structure. And then I met other people in my life who were a lot more positive. And you know, like I think like a few of my friends had kids, and it was amazing, and like getting to be part of their life and watching them like have no worries and no struggles, and realizing that like there's more to life. Like I was really, a lot of things then happened in my life that were really positive, that I was like, oh, I actually need to think more positively. And really beautifully, like my friend Ian Jimson, who I used to demo with, one day I was sitting saying to him, like, you know, this has happened and this has happened. And like my dream was always to play like Barrowlands in Hyde Park, and I'd done it at this point. I was like, this isn't happening. I was complaining about my career, and he'd always been so supportive, and he was like my dad's friend, and he was so kind. And then he just went, I won't swear, but he just swore at me and went, "You're a wee swear word. Like, you're so ungrateful." And I'd never heard him say anything but nice things to me. And I was like, oh, and he was just like, "Man, you've just lost sight of everything that you think you are because you're struggling and you've got depression and you won't admit." He's a doctor as well, and he's like, "You've never admitted to anyone you have depression." I was like, I don't like, even at this point in my life, like in my mid-20s, I was still telling people I didn't have depression. Nah, I don't, like. And that started the journey to accepting that I did, and that I had a lot of grief. And then I ended up getting counselling. Didn't work the first time round. I wasn't really ready for it. Second time round, it was so much better. Yeah, that started the journey of like having to deal with those emotions and the behavior and the erraticness and the constantly being out and the constant need for, like, I suppose in a way, like validation from people. And like I started to go like, what do I actually enjoy? And that was really sad as well, to realize like I don't even know what I like doing. I don't know who Matt is. Like, I just know who this perception of me that people have is. And I'd really lost myself, because losing myself was easier than facing like what I knew was the case, which was like Matt was someone that had lost a lot of people and didn't know how to cope with it, and had forgotten how to feel joy and how to feel value. And like through that and through like the things through my childhood that I'd never addressed, like body confidence issues and like issues around race and like the trauma of racism and stuff like that, like I'd never learned to have value in myself. I just had no self-worth. That was really hard to admit, but once I did, it got like easier for a bit. Right now in my life, I have reached a point where I've really accepted the loss, and that's been really helpful. I realized that like you can accept loss and then you can understand it. And then I think maybe the best thing I ever did was realize that I didn't have to let go of it. I just had to accept it was going to come with me. And in the last few years, I've had such a drastic change, because I'd managed to get to a place where I wasn't as anxious and I wasn't having panic attacks all the time, and I'm able to eat out, and I dealt with so many of maybe the physical things first. And then mentally I had a lot to unpick, and lockdown, I suppose lockdown was a huge factor in it, because I couldn't run anymore. That was it. I was home and I had a lot of stuff to deal with, and I wrote the record I just made called Demons, and it was really therapeutic for me, because for the first time in my life and as an artist, I was honest. And I really had to deal with emotions. And I realized for a long time I probably hadn't cried or anything. And I started letting myself be emotional again. I realized it's like unhealthy not to have all your emotions. But after lockdown and making that record and starting the process of recording it, I wasn't in a great space again for the second time in my life, but maybe the most seriously thought I didn't want to be here anymore. And that was really hard. And again, like during lockdown, we'd had so much stuff to do with racial trauma because of George Floyd. I think it was this weird moment in my life where I was stuck in a house, having to live with every trauma I'd ever lived through and really try and work through it myself. Like, there wasn't access to counselling or therapy. And I was so lucky that I'd been awarded funding through Help Musicians, who, when I got awarded the funding, I said, I've actually just been through this situation. I'm not sure I want to be here. And they put me in touch with BAPAM and got me straight into counselling. And it really changed a lot of things for me. The next summer I had a similar, it was like 2 summers in a row I had it. Not as severe the second time, but quite close. And then this year again, like, this year was like an crazy year. So much happened. It's been like one of the best years of my life and my career. But I worked on a lot of projects to do with trauma. I'm still working through all the things I've been through slowly and gradually. And the thing about therapy, it is amazing, but obviously it does mean you are unpacking everything that you've been through. And I feel like in such a better space now, but there was a point where I just took on too much, and post touring and post album I had a breakdown, and it was really horrible. I was really struggling to leave the house and to work. Like, I didn't feel suicidal this time, which I felt like was a little bit better than the 2 years before. But I was like, right, I really need some proper help here, because this is a cycle. And even when I'm dealing with things, I'm still ending up back here. And also there's like the shame is like, I felt so embarrassed that I mean, it's nothing embarrassing about it. Like, we're human, but like at the same time, in being human, like I felt shame, and I felt like, I don't think like I was like, how do you be so terrified of dying, but then also not want to be here? Like, I was just so confusing. And I guess I didn't know how to express my emotions still. And yeah, it was just like a really hard time. And part of what had happened actually was, like, on tour, I'd been telling stories around the album and being really emotionally honest, that I found really rewarding. But I think I maybe actually wasn't as ready to tell some of those stories as I thought I was, and um, essentially was then making myself typical me with self destruction, which has always been like a really horrible trait in my depression and anxiety, is like making myself live out my trauma on stage for other people, like performing again. And I actually went to a friend's wedding from that core group I was talking about when I was young, and everyone was having a laugh, and I was just me for a day. And I went, oh my goodness, like I have not been Matt all year. I've been this like going out on stage and performing for people, and I've just lost sight of myself again. So yeah, now I'm back in therapy, and it's been amazing. And I realized like one of the big things that was left anxiety wise, not depression. There's a lot to unpick, and I've got to just keep working through it. I also had I had a loss in the last year as well when it was the first time in a while, and it was quite significant. Which was part of the catalyst for derailing because of what had happened before. But yeah, the big thing was flying because of that flight and everything that happened after with eating and swallowing and the terrible panic attacks and anxiety. And I flew for the first time in 12 years, and it was amazing. And I was able to put in place like some of the techniques I've learned in therapy and the work I've been doing to really work on my anxiety and my depression. And it just felt like such an achievement, and I'm still so happy and proud. And when I was on the flight, I was with my friend, and they gave me a wee thumbs up, and I gave a thumbs up, and I was almost crying, and I think they thought something was wrong. I was like, no, I'm just so happy because I genuinely had accepted that I'd never fly again, I'd never travel certain ways, I'd never have a certain life. And I remember that time when I thought I'd never eat in a restaurant and all these things. And every time you get through them, you go like, I can do it, and I'm deserving of doing it, and I do have value, and I do have like I deserve to have these experiences. And now I'm in this stage of my life where I'm like trying to remind myself like I do deserve to be happy, and I deserve to have like nice things, and I deserve to like be able to go and travel. And I'm trying to reinforce positivity, and I've got two notebooks now, like one where I can write anything, I can write like however I'm feeling, and I've got another where it's only positive stuff, because for so long like I've been so great at like expressing my negativity, for better or worse. I struggle to express my positivity, and like that's what I want to find. I want to be happy again. I want to laugh again. I want to like not be defined by my anxiety and my depression, which kind of became my whole personality for a while. Like it's all I knew. All I knew was struggle, and all I knew was like all I was ever waiting for was the next terrible event. And now I'm like, well, I've got to look forward to things, and I've got to enjoy my life, and it doesn't diminish what has happened to me or the people I've lost by doing that. It just, in a way, it's actually a positive thing. It's like, hey, like everything that you were in my life has allowed me to go on and have a filled experience in life. And I think what was really hard to hear this year, but I needed to hear, was that like when I'd been going to people with what I thought were bouts of depression, like that wasn't the depression. That was like the real boiling point. That was like the manic. That was like me about to hit a breakdown. I'd actually been a functioning depressive for the whole year, and really wasn't looking at the signs. And now I'm trying to put in place things every day that are like positive and constructive, and that will help manage that depression, and like finally accepting that I do have anxiety, I do have depression. And it obviously it feels like so severe, having like essentially had two really horrible thoughts around the end of my life, and becoming quite close one of the times. And then I also think that the recovery from that has been so much quicker and more genuine, because I'm taking real steps and really trying to reinforce that I do have value, which has been like, I think at the heart of so much of what I've gone through, is like not valuing myself. And one of the ways I did that was like holding space for others. Like someone told me recently, like having so much care for and empathy for other people, but without like boundaries, is still self-destruction. And I'm a very destructive person to myself, because I don't think I deserve good things. Like, and that's what I'm trying to relearn, is actually like I deserve to have as many good things as anybody else. And it's not selfish to think that, because for so long when good things happened to me, I was like playing them down and thinking, well, I just sound arrogant, or I'm selfish for wanting more. And it's like, actually it's okay to want, and it's okay to have needs. And yeah, it's been a real journey, but I feel very grateful for all of the support, both from my friends and family, and the people around me throughout my career, and also the services that are available. Like I really can't say enough that if it hadn't been for things like Music Minds Matter and BAPAM, like I might not be sitting here today and help musicians. So it's like I really can't state enough like how incredibly lucky I've been, because I've not had the financial situation to be able to do that throughout my life and get therapy always, and it's been because of charities that I've had that. And yeah, I'm obviously like everyone. I suppose it's an ongoing journey, and I'm still on that journey. But I feel like I'm at a genuine turning point, which is nice. It feels like I can do it, and yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Matt's story is a profound illustration of how grief, when experienced at such a formative age, can reshape the entire landscape of one's life. Hearing about the loss of his father at 16, right when their relationship was evolving from parent and child to something deeper, struck me particularly hard. That sudden severing of connection, just as they were beginning to share those Sunday drives and conversations about music, those moments building bridges between childhood and adulthood. It's a weight that no 16-year-old should have to carry. His journey with identity as a mixed-race person after losing his dad reveals how interconnected our sense of self-worth is with our family story. The complexity of navigating that space, wanting to embrace his Black identity while fearing it might somehow diminish his connection to his dad's memory, speaks to how grief intertwines with every aspect of our being. Processing this while supporting his sister through her own struggles with identity shows just how much he was carrying. The way anxiety manifested for him, from those first panic attacks to the challenges with eating and swallowing, illustrates how our bodies often express what our minds aren't ready to process. Trying to manage performances, touring and daily life while battling these invisible struggles highlights the exhausting nature of living with anxiety and depression. His description of constantly being on tour, always being somewhere else, speaks to how we can use motion to avoid facing grief and pain. Not knowing what he enjoyed anymore, only what others perceived him to be, powerfully reflects how we can lose ourselves while surviving. His realization that we don't have to let go of loss, but rather learn to carry it, feels like such an important message for anyone dealing with grief. That moment of giving a thumbs up to his friend on his first flight in 12 years is also a beautiful testament to the possibility of growth and healing. Matt, your willingness to share both triumphs and struggles, the work of therapy and learning to value yourself, shows us that there's no shame in needing help or having to try multiple times. You're so much more than the hardships you faced, and I hope you continue to find joy in music, in connection, and in simply just being yourself, because that self is worthy of truly living. If you've experienced or are experiencing anything described in this episode, then you will find support information in the notes to accompany this podcast. A Sonic Hug podcast is recorded, edited and produced by me, Helena Rafai. Until next time, deep breaths.
From the Big Light Studio.